Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Zoe Rand, part of the Customer Success Management team. And today we're going to do a comprehensive overview of Unanet's roles and access. In this webinar, we'll review person, project, and financial roles and capabilities, alternate users, reporting by customer and department. If you have any questions, we ask you to type them in the questions box on your webinar dashboard, and we'll review them at the very end. The webinar will be recorded and available within a week in case you want to review it again or share it with someone else on your team. All our webinars are located in our Knowledge Center, which you can get to by going to knowledgecenter.unanet.com. You simply type in the webinar title in the search box. During the webinar, if you experience audio or visual issues, just drop off and rejoin the webinar. I'd like to give you a quick recap of the CSM role. Your Customer Success Manager is your main point of contact within Unanet. And we're here to help you take the confusion out of who you need to contact when you have a question or a need. We also want to make sure you're getting all the benefits of your Unanet license type. We do this by making sure we keep you up to date on added functionality and by scheduling customer success reviews, account reviews, and to assure that you're getting all the functionality currently available to you. And of course, feel free to reach out to us for additional licenses, license upgrades, and any other type of additional service. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. We are so fortunate to have Gwen with us to present the Founders Series all about user roles. Hey, Gwen.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here today to present to you all. I am with Unanet University, as Zoe said. I'm a senior technical trainer within Unanet University. And previous to that, I was one of the implementation consultants in Unanet. So I have had a lot of experience with the roles from multiple perspectives. So what we want to talk about today really is I'm going to look at sort of these four main areas and go into a little bit deeper detail. First, I'm going to take a look with you at roles by their license type. That is, which roles are applicable to which of the licenses, because I know everybody that's in attendance there's a myriad of different licenses that you all are using. Then we're going to kind of shift and we're going to look at roles by function. What particular functions would have particular types of roles that would be applicable? Once we've kind of gone a little deeper into that, then we're going to talk about alternate users, ways that you can set up alternates for people based upon which role you want a person to be an alternate for, and some ways that you can kind of tighten that down so that you don't have it too broad, so that you don't have people that are doing things that they shouldn't be able to see or access just because they're an alternate. And then we're going to be looking at reporting by department and customer. And really what we're going to get into there is something called organization access, which you all have probably seen if you are a systems admin or an HR admin or a P&R admin in your system. You've had to deal with organization access on certain roles to ensure that your people are able to see the reports that they need to see, that they have the right limitations around those roles so that they don't see something too broadly, but they get the detail that's applicable to them and what it is that they're doing. Okay, so with that, like I said, we're going to start off really looking at the roles as they break down by the license type. Now this screenshot here is the roles tab on the person profile. So you all have seen this, and it has all these different roles that are listed out there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start demystifying this large list by breaking it down first by saying, well, which of these roles go with which license type? So all of our licenses are going to have these roles where that they would be in use, could be in use. So of course your administrator, so that's your overall system administrator. And all of the columns, the first two left hand columns underneath of the project management and resource management, those are all available. Then once we get into that third column from the left, all of the roles with the exception of resource planner are available to all license types. And then of course the timesheet user and the viewer in that last column. None of the financial roles are applicable unless you have a financials license. And that kind of makes sense. But also it depends upon whether or not you've got a portfolio license as to whether some of the other roles really come into play. I will caveat very quickly and say that we do have some of our clients who might have a time-only or an expense-only license. And so some of these roles would not be applicable. If you are a time-only license type, then, for example, expense user would not be applicable. I'm sort of looking at this from the perspective of the major license types: project tracking, project portfolio, financials, etc. So again, all the licenses would have these roles applicable. Now, if you have the portfolio license, then you have 3 additional roles that are now coming into play. Those are the resource planner, the resource requester, and the Unisource user. We're going to talk about the functionalities of these roles a little bit later. Now, if you are a Portfolio Plus license type, then the checkbox under the system grouping there where you could designate a user as a TBD or to be determined planning resource, that comes into play additionally with the Portfolio Plus license. And of course the financials is all those items at the bottom. So that's sort of breaking it down by which roles are applicable based on the license type. Now, again, you'll see all of these roles on your roles tab, but just know that if a role is not available to your license type, even if you select it, it's not going to have any impact. So, you know, there's no harm, no foul if you pick one that's not applicable to you, but you know, it just doesn't have any usage that you would get out of that role. So that's kind of roles by license type. And now here's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time, is we're going to kind of really talk about these different roles by their functions. And so we know that we kind of have these high functional areas that we're thinking of as like user roles, which are timesheet user, expense user, and the Unisource user. We'll get into detail on each of those on some later slides. Our people roles are the roles of manager and viewer. Our project roles are all these ones that I've listed in here: the project manager, project lead, project approver, project viewer, resource assigner, billing manager, billing viewer, resource planner, resource requester, and customer. So again, we'll go into detail about these. I'm just kind of first stepping through a breakout of functions. Under other roles and permissions, these are roles that act along with an existing other role that you've selected for them. So this just gives additional capabilities along with other roles that are in the system. Those are your bill budget manager, your bill budget viewer, your bill rate manager, your cost budget manager, your cost budget viewer, and your cost rate manager. So some other functions, and we're continuing now just talking about the major functions, are your contact roles of your contact manager and your contact viewer. And then we have AP roles and AR roles, and these have, you know, sort of their analogous AP and AR admin, AP and AR poster, AP and AR user, and our AP and AR viewers. Then we have general ledger roles. So obviously here where we're in this section, we've gotten into those financial roles from a financial license. Our GL roles are our GL admin, our GL budget manager, our GL poster, our GL user, and our GL viewer. Now there are administrative roles outside of being the overarching system administrator, and those are the PNR admin and the HR admin. And then, of course, at the system level, there is that overall system administrator. But again, if you have the Project Portfolio Plus license type, it's at that overall systems level that you could designate a user as a TBD planning resource. So we kind of rolled through these groupings rather quickly. Let me just also say that when we post this webinar recording out into our Knowledge Center, we're also going to post a copy of this slide deck. So you'll have available this slide deck that you could look at if you're wanting to say, hey, I want to print that page out and have it handy. You'll also have that available to you. But now that we've sort of said, okay, which roles go with which license type, which roles are applicable to particular functions, let's break it down now. So if we're looking at those user role capabilities, let's look at those 3 particular user roles. Now, I kind of tried to put this in the order of what are the things most people would be using and sort of building out to the more complex roles. So typically, you're using Unanet. Most of the users are just timesheet users or expense users, or they may be both. And of course, the timesheet user is the role that allows them to create timesheets, and they can run their user reports, the user reports that are in regards to time that they may have entered, like a time detail, a summary report in regards to time. The expense user, of course, gives them the capability to create expense reports. And so they can also run user reports from that perspective. So they can run an expense detail report. They can run a user actuals report that could include both time and expense if they have both of those roles. The Unisource user, and you'll recall when I was talking about license types, the Unisource user role is applicable only to our Project Portfolio Plus licenses, because within that, this is where you have the capability to define skills down at the user level, because that's one of the big pieces of the portfolio license, being able to say, this person has a certain skill set. They have these different things that they can do, and they have certain levels of competency within those. So that is all a part of that, but they have to have the Unisource user role in order for you to use those skills on your portfolio license. And also, they need to have the Unisource user role if you wish to add them to your resource plans. That's the other big part of the portfolio license, is the capability of being able to plan your resources. And they would need to have the Unisource user role in order for you to have them available to you as you are doing those the planning and creating those plans. Now let's look at another functional area, and these are those people roles. And we said that within that people functionality that there were 2 roles that were applicable, the manager and the viewer. Now, the manager role is necessary if you want that individual to be able to approve timesheets and or expense reports. So this is talking about that sort of required level of approval, that I'm going to approve a timesheet in its totality. I'm going to approve an expense report in its totality. And you need to have the manager role to be able to do that. The manager role also allows people to run the people level reports against those people that they are the approvers for. So they could go out and run on the reports dashboard in the people report section, like an accrual details report or a people actual summary report, looking at the information from the person perspective. Now the viewer role, and I do wish that we would say like person viewer in front of the name of this role, but it's just called viewer. And what this role does is it allows you to run the people reports. So again, it's all those reports in the section of the reports dashboard that say people reports. So maybe you don't have maybe you have someone who's not a timesheet approver or not an expense approver. Maybe they're more a mid-level manager and they just need to be able to run reports on their people. Well, you can give them the viewer role and then set them up with the appropriate organization access, which we're going to talk about a little later, to ensure that they're able to see only those groups of people that they have the capability to report upon. So that's sort of that people function area. Now let's think about it from a project perspective. And we're going to have a couple of slides here, maybe even 3 slides that deal with our project role capabilities. So when we're looking at projects, there are a number of different roles that can be applicable. The first is the project manager role. And the project manager role allows them to manage all attributes of the project. So think about the being able to go in and look at all of those tabs that are on the project profile. They may need some additional capabilities, because remember I said there are some other roles that we use in conjunction with roles that give us a little extra ability to see things. But basically the project manager is able to go in and set up a new project if they have the right org access. They could create a new project, they could create tasks on that project, they could enter a lot of information like funding values, and they can set up a lot of the different pieces on the project. So they have a lot of things that they can do. They can also run any of the project reports. So if we're thinking about, again, now the reports dashboard and the project report section, they can run all of the project level reports. So now this is looking at time and expenses, viewing it from a project perspective. So they can run all of those. The project lead role is one that doesn't have as much of the access to getting to things within the projects, but they can view the projects. They can manage things at the task attribute level. So they can add tasks, they could enter, task information and set up everything at a task level. From a project level perspective, they do have the capabilities to enter certain fields. They like the % complete, the completed date, your estimated to completion, ETCs, and your estimated total fields. These are available to them to go ahead and update as well. That's for a project lead. They can go ahead and run project level reports as well. But for this role, as well as the project approver, there is something very different about both of these roles from any of the others. You cannot select these roles on the Roles tab of the person profile. You actually would have to go into the project itself under Project Administrators and designate a person there as being a project lead. It's the same for the project approver. This is not assigned via the Roles tab at all. You would have to go specifically into a project under the project administrators and name the person distinctly there. So the project approver, this is if you wish to add that optional level of approval where that you are going to approve time and or expense specifically for a project. And so that's also the reason we're just going to have that something you have to go into the project and name that person distinctly at that point in time. So some more of our project capabilities that we want to look at are the role of project viewer. Now, just like we were talking about the viewer role in people functionality, the project viewer here under the project functionality is that they have the ability to run project reports. So again, that project section under the reports dashboard, they could go and run a project time details, a project expense details, a project actual summary, a project performance report. They have the capability to run those looking at it from the project perspective. Another one of the project function type of roles is that of resource assigner. Now, I think sometimes, and I know when I'm teaching classes, I hear this a lot, there's a bit of a confusion. They think, well, a project manager can assign people to those projects. Well, they can't. the resource assigner role is needed to be able to manage the assignments on projects and tasks. So you have to have the resource assigner role so that you can go in and make assignments, edit assignments, do all those different things in regards to assignments. You cannot do that without the resource assigner role. Now, the billing manager role is also something that is looked at from a project roles capability because at the project level, what the billing manager can do is they can update the project billing configuration. So if you are invoicing out of Unanet and you need to set up, what are the what's the invoice format that you want to utilize? What is the invoice numbering scheme that you want to utilize? What are the all those different pieces that you want to bring in? Who's the contact that you're going to utilize for this project's invoicing? All of those things are available to the billing manager. The billing manager also has all of the billing post and invoice functionality. So the billing manager is able to go and run a billing and revenue post. They're able to add invoices and they're able to complete invoices. So they hold within that role the capability of all of the invoicing pieces that need to be done. They also can run billing related project reports. So they can run to find specific details on the projects to find out if they're sort of looking at saying, are my numbers looking the right way and do they match up to what I'm creating on my invoices. And they also have the ability to add and edit organization contacts because it's those organization contacts that actually populate on the invoice, who am I billing this to? So they have that capability to go in and add that information if it hasn't already been created by someone else in the original setup for that contract to create the project. Now, a couple other project role capabilities we want to talk about here are in regards to resource planning and resource requester. Now, if you think back to one of my earlier slides where I talk about the different roles based upon your license type, these license types are only for the portfolio license. The resource planner, that is a role that allows them to create and manage plans. So they can say, okay, what if I wanted to look at this scenario and I put these people on it? What would that look like if I were going to plan that out? The resource requester, again, is part of the portfolio license. And this is a capability within Unanet for, and I think a lot of times some of our larger client organizations utilize this. Let me request a resource from a particular group. I need a subject matter expert on a particular type of information or field of study, and I typically don't have that resource available to me. I'd like to request them from another group. So the resource requester role allows that individual to make that type of a resource request. Again, these are only applicable if you've got one of the flavors of the portfolio license. And the last project functionality role I want to talk about is that of customer. There is a role called customer, and it has access to a type of project approval. And this is an additional and also optional level of approval that you could set up. Maybe you do have an outside customer that is requiring that they approve timesheets before they're invoiced. You could set this up and they can approve at the project level. Also, there is within the customer approval process, it allows you to say that the customer approves first before anyone else. And sometimes our clients use that by saying, I actually want like my project approver approving first before it goes to that timesheet manager approval. And you can sort of utilize this customer role to make that functionality work in that perspective. But from a roles perspective, it's just access to doing another level of project approvals. The customer role can run a project time details report, a project expense detail, and an actual summary report. They can't run any other reports in the system other than those three. They do have the capability to add and view project notes. Now, I'm not going to talk about project notes and everything that you can do with those because that's not applicable within this webinar. However, later I'm going to give you a link to go and read a little bit more about project notes, because if you're going to use the customer role with your external customer and allow them to add and view project notes, you are also going to want to restrict your notes down to only certain roles that can do things with them, because you wouldn't necessarily want your external customer seeing everything that you're putting into your project notes. And the customer can go ahead and create an alternate for themselves as well if they needed to. Okay, so that ends up the sort of project functionality areas of roles. So now let's talk about this other functional area that I called that are other roles and permissions. Now these roles are ones that get added on, if you will, to other roles that somebody already has that gives them the ability to do more things. So let's talk about what that means. The one that I think is the biggest one that people use is the bill rate manager role. And this allows the view of bill rate information throughout Unanet. And it applies to the manager, project lead, project approver, project viewer, resource planner, resource assigner, and viewer roles. Now, what that means is, let's say you did not have the bill rate manager role and you're a project manager. You're not able to see bill rates when you are in the project. You're not able to run reports to be able to get access to bill rates. You would just, if you were running a report on projects, you would see number of hours. You would not see anything that had to do with the bill rates. So if by having bill rate manager role added on to something like a project manager, a project lead, a project viewer, that would allow for when you're running those reports and looking at that information, you're able to see the bill rate and the dollar totals. So if you said, you know, the bill rate's $100 an hour and they worked, 3 hours, you'd see the total 300 out there instead of just a total of hours. Additionally, there's a property setting that can be turned on that would say whether or not the people with a bill rate manager role have the capability of also editing the bill rate fields. And recall, property settings are global, so it's either on or off for everybody with the bill rate manager role. So if you're, have any questions in regards to that, if you're not a systems admin in your system, you would need to talk with your systems admin. But if you don't have that turned on, there's probably reasons that was not turned on in your system within your initial implementation. The bill budget manager role, again, this is just an addendum, if you will, onto the project manager and project lead roles, and that does allow them to view and edit the labor and expense bill budget information at the project and task levels. So on that budget tab within the project, that's going to let them edit the labor and expense bill budget information. And then the bill budget viewer allows those project managers and project leads to view that information at the project and task levels. They can view it, they can't edit it. They would need the bill budget manager role as the addendum to their project and project lead role in order to be able to edit. And just parallel right along with that, we have the same thing for all of the cost rate managers, the cost rate information in the system. So you'll see that, and I'll just go back one slide momentarily. So bill rate manager, bill budget viewer, all in regards to bill rates. We have in parallel the exact same thing for cost rate manager, cost budget manager, and cost budget viewer. These are the things that allow a person to see the cost rate. So that is the hourly rate that you are paying someone. So this is what allows view into salary information. So yes, billing information is sensitive. Salary information is even more sensitive. So you want to be very cautious in regards to whom you give these cost rate manager and bill rate manager roles to, because you're allowing them to see sensitive information across all of your Unanet. So again, cost rate manager allows them to see that salary type of information. It's applicable to the exact same roles that we talked about for the bill rate manager. And there is an additional property setting that could globally control whether those cost rate fields are editable or read-only across those different areas. The cost budget manager also allows the project managers and project lead to view and edit the labor and expense cost budget information on the project and tasks on those budget tabs. And then the cost budget viewer allows them to view that information when they go into a project or task, but they can't edit it. Contact roles. So we talk about those contact function as a functional area of roles. And so we have contact manager and contact viewer. The contact manager, this just allows people to add, edit, and view the contact information. So remember, contact information is on the organization level. So you've got somebody else who's creating your organizations and managing them. A contact manager can manage the contacts associated with an organization. And a contact viewer can only view that information. So if you're not already using your Unanet as sort of a contact management system, know that you can, by utilizing these very special roles, expand your use of Unanet and make it your contact management system as well. It's very powerful that way, and we do that internally within Unanet as well. Now let's start looking at our different roles that are within that financial area. And again, we're going to break these into those functional areas of AP, so accounts payable, AR, accounts receivable, and GL, general ledger. So there's an AP admin role that can go in and set up the things that are needed for accounts payable. So they can set up the bank accounts and, you know, the accounts payable information, the contacts, addresses, the vendor profiles. And then they have some limited access to add or edit on the organizations. So they're kind of doing the setup that's necessary for accounts payable. Now, your AP poster role, they have the ability to go in and do the entry, submission, and posting of checks, of vendor invoices, of vendor payments. And they also can have access to be able to void checks. And so they have a lot of these capabilities. So again, they can enter, submit, and post in all of those areas. And then they have view-only privileges for going out and looking at that sort of organization view. The AP user has the ability to enter and submit vendor invoices and payments, but they can't post anything. And they also don't have the capability to get to the print checks, and they can't void checks. So they just are able to enter and submit on your vendor invoice, your vendor payments, and again, they have some view-only privileges out into the organization. And then your AP viewer, and if you haven't caught on already, the word viewer basically means run reports. The AP viewer has the ability to run the AP aging and the vendor activity report. They can run the organization tree view reference report, so they can kind of see how that the organizations are set up from a parent-child relationship, but they don't have any abilities to do anything further. And so again, another parallel is on the accounts receivable side. So we again have an accounts receivable admin, poster, user, and viewer, but it's just different what they have their access to. So your AR admin has the ability to do the setups for the bank accounts, the setups for payment methods, and for contacts, addresses, and customer profiles. And then they have limited access to add or edit organizations. Our accounts receivable posters have the ability to enter, submit, and post your customer payments and your deposits. Your AR user has the ability to enter and submit those same two things, but they cannot post them. So again, this is allowing for a little bit of limitation and separation of power, both across the AP and the AR roles on here. And again, your AR viewer is just running reports in regards to accounts receivable. So they're running that aging report, the AR activity report. And again, they can run those the reference report for the organization tree view so that they can kind of see what those look like. Now, from the general ledger perspective, there's a lot more going on, and the GL admin has a lot more areas that they have for setup, because basically they have most of those accounting areas that they can do their setup on. They're doing the accounts, and they can create budget names and budget profiles and cost elements and cost structures, and they're looking at the cost pool groups and fiscal years and payment methods and posting groups. So all of this sort of accounting setup is done by the GL admin. So they also are setting up the financials general ledger, so their cost pool calculations and their fiscal period close and their bank reconciliation. They also can do the labor cost post and unpost, the expense cost post and unpost. And then they can manage certain attributes on the organizations, like accounts and addresses and contacts. So these are those details on the organization tab. So again, it's a lot of that setup and background information that's needed from the financial perspective. Then we kind of get into a little bit more analogous view here on other GL roles. There's a GL budget manager, which has access to do the budget imports and exports. They have all the general ledger budget management screens available to them. And now these poster, user, and viewer roles, again, seem very analogous to the things that we have seen with AR and AP, with the exception of, obviously, they just have access to different things. So our GL poster has access to all of the GL entry management screens. So they can enter, submit, and post on all of those, whereas the GL user can only enter and submit. They can't do any posting. And the GL viewer, again, just has access to the general ledger reports. So the financial statements, the general ledger inquiry, and the detail and summary reports as well. So now let's take a look at the administrative roles. There are a couple of other administrative roles outside of being a systems administrator. One is called the HR administrator, and this is really all the things that have to do with managing people in Unanet. So think of that person profile. So they are going to go in and they have access to, add people, to update the all the people attributes, do a rate increase, a salary increase of cost rate. They also can set up reminders. They have access to any person-related exports. They can do accruals, associate people to their accruals. They can post accruals if they need to do that. They can schedule things. They can populate time. They do all the setup of the approval groups, accrual plans, labor categories, email notifications, and reminder templates. So they have access to all of that so that they can make those types of updates as needed. Then the P&R administrator has basically all of the functions of the HR administrator, as well as access to things in regards to projects. So really a P&R administrator has access to almost everything of the system administrator, except they've got very limited accounting access. There's only certain things that they can update, and I listed them on the slide here. And they cannot give the administrator role to anybody else, and nor can they change the password on that. So this is kind of like a sub-system administrator. They're not the overarching, which then just brings us to those system roles of the system administrator is a system-wide administrator with access to all of the options. But then also up at that system level, if you have the Project Portfolio Plus license, which means you have a certain number of licenses that you are only going to use for planning purposes, they have no other role that they can do other than you can plan on them. That is sitting up there under that system level as well. And so only if you have Project Portfolio Plus as a license, then those licenses that you've purchased for planning only, that would be the only use for that particular role. So I know that was a lot of information, really quick there, and we do have a couple more topics to get through. One thing I want to talk about is setting up alternate users. And there are two ways you can do that. This is a screenshot from a people profile. I'm looking at fake contracts in my system. And on the left navigation panel, there is alternates. And we could go over here and say, okay, I want to designate alternates for this individual, you just do a search in the filter, pick from the left listing, pick the role in the middle, and then move them over to the right and save. And that's how you would select alternates for this if you wanted to do this from the perspective of, I'm going to pick alternates for these people. Now, conversely, an individual could go to preferences up in the upper right when they are logged in, and they can designate alternates, because on their preferences screen in the left navigation panel, there's also an alternates. So again, they could come in and select someone and say, I want to pick that person and make them my alternate timesheet user. Now, one thing I always hear when we start talking about alternates is, seems like maybe that could open myself up to a little broader exposure than I would really want. I want to point out that there are 3 property settings that your systems administrator can set globally that will determine whether or not certain people can be alternates. And if you need to be DCAA compliant, there are a couple of these that have to be set anyway in order for you to be DCAA compliant. So for one thing, you're not going to let non-employees, so if someone is designated as like being a subcontractor, so they have the non-employee classification on the person profile, there's a setting that doesn't allow them to become an alternate. Another one is that you can say, don't let anyone who's not a manager become an alternate. And so that's another property setting. And then you can also restrict it by role, like they have to have the manager role in order to be made an alternate for manager. They would have to have a project manager role in order to be a project manager. So you can also limit it down by here. I would say I typically always see these top 2 as the setting, because if you say prevent non-managers from being alternates, you've tightened that down a lot as it is. Also, people say, well, maybe I just don't want my end user being able to select an alternate at all. And if you don't want that to happen, give our customer support desk a call. They can actually hide that alternate on the preferences. So as an end user, if I went to preferences, I wouldn't even see alternate. So that is another way in which you can tighten that down. Okay, so we've got one more topic that I want to get through here in about the next 3 minutes or so that we'll have some time to answer some questions that I know we've got questions that have been coming in. So let's just kind of step through something here real quick. I was going to say this is Grace Director, and we're going to see what kind of setup that she should have in Unanet based upon her needs. So here is like a little org chart of the company that she works for, and specifically, Grace Director is in charge within the Government Solutions Group for cyber and systems engineering. So what we really want to do is go out into Unanet and take a look at how we're going to limit her access so she can only see the things that she needs to see. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over into Unanet right now, and I am on Grace Director's person profile. And I can see that she has certain roles over here, like she's a project viewer, so she can view projects, and she has a viewer role to view people information. So what we can do is we can look at the organization access over here on the left navigation panel of Grace's person profile. Now, only certain roles are available for organization access. We're going to talk here about this project viewer and viewer role here real quickly. Currently, these are set to none. So what this means is, while she has a role, she doesn't really have anything she can do with it just yet. While we say, Unanet is a roles-based system, you need to have the role and you need to have the appropriate access to do something. Think of it this way: if you're a timesheet user, you have to have assignments on a project in order to put anything on your timesheet, because the role in and of itself isn't doing anything. You have to have the ability to do something. If you have a project manager role and someone has gone on to the project and named you as the project manager, well, now you have access to be the project manager of that project. So again, it's 2 things in conjunction. but sometimes we need something a little broader. Grace needs to be able to run reports for cyber and systems engineering so that she knows what all is going on. So let's take a look at what she needs. Let's first look at the viewer down here, which has only one row. You see here, viewer, tells us our access type is person. So remember, the viewer is viewing those people reports. So I can go in here and I can say, well, let's select which organizations she actually is going to be able to see. Now we know on that other slide we saw the org chart, and that under the government services area, she was responsible for the cyber and the systems engineering groups. So by coming in here and picking these two organizations with her viewer role, and then coming down here and saving, now if I go back to organization access, I see this is distinctly listed here. So she can go and run people reports, and when she pulls that information, she is only, if she says, give me all people I can see, and that's one of the drop downs on the selection criteria page, she's only going to see people who have as their person organization government service SE and government service cyber. Now, she also needs to run reports on her people to see what they're doing on projects. So that's up here with the project viewer role. And we see we have two rows here, because when we think about projects, projects have a couple of different things that are going on. They have a project org code, which tells us which customer it is, and they have an owning org code, which tells us which internal organization is doing that work. So she has both GSSE and GS Cyber. So for the owning org, we're going to want to replicate that. So we're going to come in here and say, yes, she has these same two groups that she needs to be able to see project reports for. So we're going to pick those two and save. And then when we go back to org access, we see those two here. But here on the project or the customer level, it's still at none. So here we need to go in and say, well, which of our customers does she have the ability to run projects, run reports against, rather? So it might be that she is, okay, we don't care which customer it is, as long as the work is being done by her two groups, she can run those reports. So we could just click at the customer level and everything is selected. Or maybe it's just that she only has customers 1 and 3. So we could limit within that. We'd save this, we go back to our organization access, and now we can see this. Therefore, we have limited what she has the ability to see. And many of the roles that we've gone over today have, if you look in our help documentation, we'll say organization access is available. So you could limit the org access on an HR administrator. You could limit the organization access for a project manager. You could limit the organization access for a billing manager. There are a lot of different roles where you can utilize this to tighten down what they actually are going to have that visibility into. So one of the things I'm going to provide to you all as well is a, because like I said, this will be made available to you, is in our Knowledge Center a roles quick guide. And what I want to do is just very briefly go to this and show this to you, because within this you will find, these collapse this on the left, you will find by expanding this, not only let me look at sort of a description of each of these roles, sort of broken out again by those functional areas, but which ones of these are going to allow for organization access, as well as, if we keep scrolling past all of these, a comparison of the different things that all of these different roles can do. So all of this is available out in the Knowledge Center. You will have a link to this available to you in the slide deck when it is out there and available to you. I'm also going to include on this slide deck a number of other links that are going to go into either our Knowledge Center or into our help docs, so that you would be able to, oops, didn't mean to click that. So you would be able to click into these links and get other detailed information. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and go over back to Zoe and see what kind of questions that have come on.
Hey, Gwen, we have a lot of questions. So I'm hoping people can stay on a little past 2:30 so that everybody's questions can get answered. So the first one is, which people can the viewer view?
Okay, that's a great question. So again, it's going to depend upon that organization access that we just went through. So depending upon what you gave them access into, and let me go back over into Unanet here just real quickly. So, you know, depending upon what you have said that they, oh, I'm on the wrong one. What you have said that they've had the access into, they would be able to see. So if I went over here to reports, and let's just go into, because viewers going into people reports, I'm just going to pull up an actual summary. You know that it's that you have on the report on, there is primary approvees. That means you are a manager role, and because the manager role sees people reports, so that viewer role is innate within it. So this says, just let me see all the people that I am the approver for. The next one says my primary and my alternate, so that's let me see all the people I approve and all the people that I am the alternate approver for. Or if I say, let me see all people I can see, so in our example of Grace Director, since she is just viewing reports, she would be picking, let me select all people I can see, and then let me go back over here to Grace's person profile. And so when she clicks on that all people I can see, she is only going to see the people that are in those organizations.
Okay. Can the HR administrator see pay rates of employees, and is that function necessary for them to set up a new employee in Unanet?
Yeah, the HR administrator, I mean, the whole idea is they are going to be coming in here and setting up people so that they could come in and they would be able to add people into the person profile, and they also could increase the salary amount as well. So yes, they're going to be in there seeing cost rates. Now, the one thing you do have the ability to do is you can use organization access for that HR administrator role. So if you wanted to limit to which organizations within Unanet that HR administrator has the visibility into their salaries, you could limit it that. It doesn't have to be global across everybody that's in Unanet.
Okay. And during the webinar, of course, this came in early in the webinar, could you answer specifically what role allows someone to edit the budgeted hours for each user with people assignments of a project?
Oh, sure. That's your resource assigner role.
Okay. Okay. I thought you'd gone over it. I just wanted to make sure. The next person, I'm not clear on the statement that project lead and project approver can't be assigned from the person's profile.
Okay.
Gwen stated you must go into the project and name the person. However, I see project lead and project approver in the roles list in the people profile. So
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me demonstrate that. Yeah, let me demonstrate that real quick.
Okay.
So here is the roles tab. And so over here for project approver and project lead, I cannot click into these. These are grayed out. I can be here all day long and just keep clicking and nothing is going to happen. Now, let's say, and I'm just going to open up projects in another tab here, and I'm just going to go into a project that's in my system here. So let's say that I went over to administrators and I wanted to name Grace Director as the project lead. I'm just going to search for her in the listing here. And everybody's going to come up in this listing because, again, you're designating them right at the project. So I picked her and I'm going to hit save. Now, if I go back over here to her profile, I'm just going to refresh my screen and go back over here. Now you see that project lead has a check in the box, a little gray check. And that tells me that she is a project lead somewhere in Unanet. We have gone on to a project and specifically named her as a project lead. And it works the same way on a project approver if I had gone onto a project and done that. Just a little bonus here, I'll show you that if your role allows you capabilities to the reference reports for project administrators, then again, under reports and reference, project administrators, I could run this report and see, everybody who is any kind of a project administrator. I could come in here and let me just put in specifically for Grace Director and run against her, and then I would see right here that she is the project lead here at project level access, meaning I went onto the project and named her there, and that she has organizational access, because remember we gave her organization access for her project viewer role, and these are those two project customers that she has the project viewer access to. So this report is very powerful if you're wanting to know what any particular person has set, because you aren't going to be able to know right here just by seeing the gray box of knowing which project she's the lead on.
Terrific. Do people have to have both the resource planner and resource assigner roles to enter plans into Unanet?
No, only if you want them to be able to assign once the planning is done, because when you're doing your planning, you would have to have you may want to assign up on the end of your plans, but you would need to have the resource assigner role in order to do the assignment.
Can the customer role only approve timesheets, or can they also enter time? An example be a subcontractor be granted this role to enter his own time rather than us having to create and enter timesheets on their behalf.
For someone to enter timesheet, they have to have the timesheet user role. So when I was talking about the customer, and I'm going to go back over here to that project, that there's a administrator role called customer. First off, the person would have to have a role of customer over here. Let me just go ahead and give that to Grace Director. So they have to have the role, which means they have to have a profile, which means they are using up one of your licenses. So just know that. If you're going to have an external have the ability to come in and do an approval, they're going to use up one of your user licenses. They would have to have the customer role, and then on the project, you could go to customer, and then here, I'm just going to put in the wildcard of the % sign so that you can see the only people who come up here is I have 2 people designated with a customer role in my system here, one being Grace, whom I just gave that role to. So if I picked her, then I have some abilities. I can say she approves time only, or I can say she's going to approve expenses only, or she's going to approve both. But it's all in regards to this one project for customer 2, the Mars mission project up here. I also could say, let's say we don't have her approve expenses. I could say customer approves first. So if you are thinking about the perspective of when approvals occur, if you have, someone submits a timesheet and it goes out to both a project approver and their manager at the same time, but if you wanted it not to get to the manager until the project level got approved first, that's what I was saying. Sometimes you use this role of customer and actually give it to like someone who's also either the project lead or project manager, because you want them to actually approve first before it gets to the timesheet manager approver. So I know that was a lot of information all at once just there. So I hope that answered the question. I do know of clients that we have that have their external clients that require approving timesheets, and so this is the mechanism in which they do that. But let me let you know, it does require a license. And then for each of those subcontractors, you would have to create a profile for each of them for them to enter their time, and that would take a license up for each one of those currently.
And Gwen, it's 2:30. We have about 15 questions to go. Can you stay on a little bit longer so we can knock these out?
Well, let me just ask this, because I know our clients that are on the call with us have designated themselves an hour for this. We certainly will have this available as a recording later in about a week's time, and you can fast forward through that recording to get to the end of the questions. I'm willing to stay on for 10 additional minutes, but then also if we don't get through all of them, the CSMs will normally take their clients' questions and send an email reply back to them too.
Okay, terrific. We'll see if we can knock this out. So please clarify, bill budget information is the column under budgeted on the project tab of a project, correct?
Bill budget information, yes.
Okay.
So here's our labor budget, and here's our expense budgets. So here's your bill budget. So that's that bill budget field we were talking about for bill budget manager. So that bill under the labor budget and under the expense. And then there's the cost. So your cost budget would be here and here.
Okay. Our project leads cannot enter cost information in the budgeted column of projects despite having the cost manager role.
It's not the cost manager role, it's the cost budget manager role.
Gotcha.
The cost manager role allows them to see the cost, does not allow them to edit.
Wait, I'm sorry. They say that despite having the cost budget manager role.
Oh, despite having the cost budget manager role.
Would that be access?
It could be it could be access, but I would say that probably is going to take a deeper look, and I would suggest that you call our support desk and step through that with them, because it would require looking at your particular setup and digging a little deeper, and that the webinar is not the appropriate place for that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, what roles are needed to view or add/edit fixed price items and tasks in a project?
Okay, so if you're doing fixed price items, and we'd have to, let me get onto a fixed price project actually. So any fixed price where you're going to have the ability to come over here and set up your fixed price over here, you're going to have a billing manager role or a P&R admin role or a admin role for all of those. I'm trying to think if the project manager can. Let me show you something real quickly here. If you are in, let me pull up the new tab. If you are in our help documentation and you're wondering what roles can do what things, a little bit more, again, I've sent you the link to that information in the Knowledge Center, but also if you look in the people dashboard information under Unanet menu and go into the profile, you can go into this roles tab and see you can have a breakdown of every role here, and it gives you a lot of information of what they can do, like the particular limitations on what a project lead does versus a project manager. So if we are looking at billing manager, this says they have access to the project level billing configuration screens. So that's where your fixed price is set up. So it might be that you would need to add that role on. And again, your project manager role does also have the capabilities of being limited by the organization access. So you might need to be looking at a couple of different things in regards to that. While I'm here looking at this roles here, I do want to point out that like those other roles and permissions, I was noting that certain things like having a bill rate manager being able to edit fields, here is that property setting information. So as you're going through here, if there are any caveats or limitations around like certain property settings need to be set, that'll also be here for you to be able to reference that. So it might behoove you, if there are particular questions and things you're trying to figure out, come and kind of figure, is there something else that maybe isn't set up in my system before you give that call to your CSM or to the support team, because you might be able to ascertain oh, it's a checkbox I don't have checked.
Okay. Is there an audit trail on the person profile specifically for what roles were assigned and by whom?
Not on the roles.
Okay.
There's not a thing on there for that.
And where can we view our alternate setup rules?
Like to know how that you might have your alternate set in regards to that?
Yeah, I'm guessing yes.
Okay, I would, let me find it. I thought I had it up. I would send you to, if you have the capability to look at your admin properties, and it depends upon your role, but if you have the capability of looking at your admin properties, under Unanet access permissions, there is this area called alternate settings. And these are those 3 settings that I noted on that one screenshot that I had on the slide deck. So this is where you would see those. Now, if you want to know, if you don't have the ability to see whether you have these turned on or not in your system, again, I would send you to the help docs, because under the help docs, you do have the capability of just going in and looking at admin properties, and you do have an entire listing that you can look at that would breaks out all of these properties to be able to see. And somewhere, if I scroll down enough or go into the right place here, I'll find those Unanet properties, and here they are. And so you could go into those and see what they mean.
Okay, and going back to the alternate settings, Gwen mentioned that some are required by DCAA, such as non-employees from becoming alternates. Was this also a requirement to prevent non-managers from becoming alternates, or was that just an example of commonly used?
Well, I tell you what, let's go in and look for that, because both in our help docs and in our knowledge center, we have really great documentation on what DCAA requires. So if I were to go and do a search for DCAA in the knowledge center, I have screenshots here that tell you all of the things that you need to have set in order to know that you are DCAA compliant. So here's the alternate settings here as well, and it looks like they want all 3 to be set.
Okay.
At least that's what our documentation is showing here.
Okay. And I think you went over this, but how do you make a person a project viewer for just one specific project?
Oh, that's real easy. You just go to the specific project, and then you go under Administrator and Project Viewer. They would have to have the Project Viewer role first. And so I'm just going to look at all my people in here who have the Project Viewer role. And let's say that we wanted to make Grace a Project Viewer. We could just add her here and save.
Okay.
You know, we can also, you know, give other project viewers down here as well. This is like, it says it's assign alternate ones, but these are just giving other people, you know, the capability of being able to do that
and
as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
No, so go on.
Okay. Does the viewer role see cost and salary information as people? I think you answered that. That was no, but go ahead. I might be wrong.
Yeah, it all depends on what roles you give them. So they would have to have the cost rate manager role in order to see any salary information. They would have to have the bill rate manager role in order to see anything about bill rates. So if you do not have, let's say you do not have either one of those roles, then you run a report and you see hours. You don't see anything else. You would see, you know, here's John Doe worked 12 hours. Boom, nothing more.
Okay. And what is the difference between a manager and a project manager role?
Okay, great question. The manager role, and also I'll note that if you just hover over the eye, the little information bubble, you'll get a quick information on what that role does. This is your time and expense approval. So if you want to be, if this person is going to be an approver for an approval group, they have to have the manager role. The manager role has to do with people. It has nothing to do with projects. The project manager role is what you would look at for manages those project settings and has access to the project reports.
Okay. And this is I'm sorry, this is a question a CSM can answer. So how do I give a person access to all hours and salaries for only certain orgs?
Again, that's with our organization access. So if you are saying, I want, so I mean, look at here. So we've got her set up as a viewer, and she's a cost rate manager. Those are two things. And we gave her organization access to just these groups here. So you know what? Let me go and log in as Grace.
And she wanted to clarify, hours for everyone in the company, but salaries for only certain people.
That's not going to happen.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, those roles, the ability to cost rate manager role goes along with whatever other roles you have. And if you give broader access on those other roles, then they have the ability to get to those costs as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so like if I come down here, I just, for example purposes, if I ran an actual summary report on all people I can see, and I'm going to run it to include expenses, and I'm just going to say, I don't know, BOT to today. And then because she has both cost rate and bill rate manager, she has an ability to say which she wants to report on. If she only had cost rate manager role, billable charges would not even show up as a selection criteria. If she had neither one of these, this whole section reporting on would not even show up in the selection criteria. The person running it would not know they were missing anything, if you will. And so you'll see, I said, give me all people I can see, and I kept it just at the organization level. She only sees these two organizations, nothing more.
Okay. And I know we're getting tight. If you request to globally hide alternates from customer services, will alternate options still be available to the system administrator?
Oh, yes, because all you're doing when you say that you want to hide it from preferences, that's up here. And so this is me as an individual logged in. This is who I want to pick as my alternates, okay? If you wanted to hide that, then, and I'm logged in as a system administrator, I can go onto any person and go to their alternates and set them up as I want. So the system admin could do that, an HR admin could do that for those organizations that they have the ability to get into.
All right, we still have about 5 questions, but it's 2:43, and I know we need to wrap this up. So should we get to the rest of the slides?
Yes, let's go ahead and do that real quickly. Okay. I forgot we actually had more slides.
It's all good.
There you go.
So everybody, don't forget, and I know we still have a lot of people still on this webinar, but don't forget about our upcoming Unanet University classes. We have 3 foundations classes coming up in March, as well as a virtual class. If you are interested in attending one of these classes, please register soon, because the courses close registration a week in advance to give time to prepare for the appropriate number of people entering the class. And you can always check out the schedule at unanet.com, click on their services menu, then Unanet University.
Okay.
And we will whip through these. This is our talented customer success management team, of which I'm a part of. And again, our goal is to help you reach your business goals. And if you're not sure who your CSM is, please email csm@unanet.com and your CSM will contact you. And thank you, Gwen. My gosh, this was such a popular webinar. It was great content. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks. Once again, the webinar presentation will be available within a week. And for those who had questions that weren't answered today, I think there's just 5 left. We'll get these questions to your CSM, and then they'll be in contact with you. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great afternoon. And Gwen, thank you for extending the webinar just so we could get to more people's questions.
Very, very happy to do so. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Thanks.